Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the Pre-State Allocation Board meeting. I'm Sue Reese. I'm one of the Operation Managers in Fiscal Services. And just to remind you, in case you didn't know, today's board meeting is an early meeting. It's at 2 o'clock at the State Capitol, and it will be in room 447 for now. Today we're going to present you with some highlights of some of the board items that are going today, as well as some informational items from the Department of Education. With that, I'd like to start and highlight, hopefully if I work this right, the school facility program funds that are still available at this juncture. As of July, we have $330.1 million left. Last month, we processed approximately $89.9 million in fund releases. And this pie represents the status of the remaining bonding authority, and this combines all the propositions, Proposition 1D, 55, and 47. So as a group, it represents $14.908 billion. The blue shaded area is the items that we've already apportioned out. That represents about 92.9% of those bond funds. And the kind of red color is about 4.1% of unfunded approvals that we've done so far. And what's remaining out of all the new construction bonding authority is about 3%. Any questions with that? You guys are a quiet crowd this morning. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian LePasque, and we'll continue on with our presentation this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Just going to kind of highlight a few of the things on the agenda today. There's a lot more items than what you see on the slide here, but these are kind of the highlights of the agenda today. The first one is it's an action item. It's for the general site development grants. And what it's going to do is actually extend those grants for another year. So I just want to kind of give you a little bit of history of what the general site grant is and kind of where it came from. Back in 2006, there was an ad hoc group that got together to discuss grant adequacy in the school facility program. And one of the things that came out of that group was there was a question whether or not general site development was included in the pure people grants for SB 50, which is the tenet of our school facility program. Because of that, we decided to institute a general site grant that first year that actually expired January 1 of 2008. And it's just to provide general site development grants for projects that are new construction projects on new sites or projects where you're doing additions to schools where you're actually acquiring acreage. So it's only for those projects that acquire new acreage in the plan and the project. So a little bit of history on it. Like I said, the first time it was good until January 1 of 2008. And every year subsequent to that, we've extended it for another year. And the reason we've been doing extensions each year instead of just instituting the grant completely is that the idea that came out of this group was that staff and stakeholders would take a look and examine whether or not that indeed the grant was left out of the per pupil grants in SB 50. It's something that was kind of discussed but not finalized. So it's still the case today. Those talks are still going on. It's an ongoing type of thing. So that's why what we do each year is we just extend it for another year. The regulations you have before you today in this item would extend it until January 1 of 2013 because currently the regulations will expire at the end of this year. So they're going to be good all the way through next year is what this item will do is if it's approved. I have a question. Lyle.
Yeah, Brian, I understand that statement about extending it 1 year at a time, but it's been in place for a long time. It's pretty clear to everyone that it would be reasonable to just leave it in place. And I don't quite understand the concept of just every year extending it 1 year. It's a lot of work for you. It creates some amount of concern and problems for school districts. It's obvious it's never going to go away. I don't know why you don't just make it a permanent adjustment.
Okay. For those of you on the webcast, Lyle was asking, why don't we just institute this grant permanently? It's been extended now for 3 or 4 years in a row. He's concerned about the work that it creates for our staff and for school districts. It's very nice of him. And so he's kind of just wondering why we don't extend it. You know, he says it's obvious that it's going to be included every year from now on, so why don't we just extend it? And I think, you know, the reason why I think that that's the case, what I've kind of been told, what I hear, is that it's something that's, you know, it's not necessarily something that has been decided that's going to be permanent. We look at this grant each year. We examine our grants kind of on an ongoing basis. It's one of those things that's never been fully resolved. It's an ongoing discussion, not just this general site grant, but the grant adequacy thing in total. It's, you know, nobody can agree on that, and it's been many years that this has been going on. So I think that's the reason why we feel it's prudent to continue it 1 year at a time, is that those things are ongoing and we're kind of discovering new things all the time. Is there any other questions on that item before I move on? Okay. We actually have two other items today, two joint use items. There's only one mentioned here, but the other one, just so you know, they're both reports. The first one we have is just an update on projects that were apportioned last year. There's still one project that's left out there that hasn't converted its fund release yet. So it has an apportionment, hasn't come in for fund release yet, and the board asked for quarterly reports. That's the first report we have. The second report we have, what's mentioned here and what's a little more important of the two, is we have this year's projects. Every year we have a cycle that runs from March 2nd until March 1st. So it's basically an always open program. We received 13 projects this year. The total request for those projects after they've been processed is just shy of $12 million. However, we do have a problem with our authority. We only have about $561,000 worth of authority in the joint use funds. So this item, more than anything else, is talking about what our options are. Are we going to be able to fund partially projects? And I'm going to get into it a little bit of what we can and can't do, but essentially the idea of this item is, you know, what are we going to do with this year's funds? We don't have enough. Is there any money we can transfer over like we've done in the past? You know, what kind of things can we do for these projects? So just to give you a little bit of background on the joint use program for those of you that don't know, it's a 50-50 funded program. There's a requirement in statute that the partners pay at least 25% of the eligible project costs. That would be half of the district's 50% match. The only way that the district can contribute more than 25% to the project is if they have a local bond that specifies the project. So occasionally we'll have projects that come in, they're fully funded by the district, the partner won't be contributing any, but typically, unless there is a specific bond, a specific mention of the project in their bond, the partner has to pay the 25% share of the project. The way we order these projects, which is also important to this item, we have two kinds of joint use projects. We have type 1 projects and we have type 2 projects. Type 1 projects, what that means is just that it's part of a new construction application. So, you know, you're building classrooms and you're also doing a joint use project. That means it's a type 1 project. Or if you're building a new school with part of it being joint use, that's a type 1 project. A type 2 project is a standalone joint use project. So it's on its own. There's no other things going on with it, just the project itself. All type 1 projects are funded before all type 2 projects, and within each type, we fund those by date of order received, and then also no school district can get 2 projects funded before each school district gets at least 1. So if you have a school district with 2 applications and you have 3 other school districts with 1 application, you'll fund each district 1 application, and then the district with 2 applications will be funded their second project last. So that's how that works. And that's really important to note because when we do have limited funds, we have to go in order of how they're listed to offer those funds to those projects. Another couple of important things before I get into the item. There's 2 pieces of authority in this item that are really important. One of them is Education Code Section 100410A. And what that basically says is that we have old lease purchase program bonds still. We have some authority in there that it came from the lease purchase program. It's been kind of hanging out on our status of funds for a while. But in order to convert that authority to cash, we have to sell those bonds. However, this education code prohibits us from doing that after we've initiated bond sales for the SFP. So the only time that we've been able to transfer money out of LPP into joint use, SFP joint use in the past, is when we have cash proceeds. This particular bit of authority is only bond authority. It's not cash. So we don't have the ability, because of this education code, to transfer that authority to a current program like SFP joint use because there's no cash to back that. So we'll never be able to convert that authority into cash. So in other words, there's no reason to transfer the authority over in the first place. The other important bit of authority I'm talking about bond authority and then also authority for the program. I know it's a little confusing. The other piece of authority, legal regulation speaking, is a provision in our regulations that talks about partial funding, and I'll get into that in just a second. So like as I mentioned, we have 13 applications, 12 million. The authority we have that we're able to use is about 561,000. So you can see we're extremely short there. What we're going to do is, what we're proposing to do at least, it depends on what the board decides today, but we would go through our list in the order that they're ranked, and we would offer the $561,000 we have available to each of those projects. I believe the first 5 or 6 or 7 projects on the list, their grant would actually exceed that $561,000 we have available, so they would be taking a partial unfunded approval. And what that means is that our regulations also state that if there isn't enough money to fund a full project, what we do is we offer the funds available for that project. The district has 2 choices. They can either accept the partial, what's called a haircut. So, if your project's worth $1 million, if we had, tons of authority, you only get the $561K, and you take that as your full and final approval without the ability to come back. Or you can refuse funding, and you can decide you want to wait for later. Maybe there'll be money coming back into the program at some other time, and they can move on to the next application. Either way, if you accept the partial, you'll get your partial. If you refuse it, we send your application back, and the same as if we don't have any more authority, we'll also send your application back to you. So we're thinking most likely we'll be exhausted of funds after this funding cycle, and we're seeking direction from the board on what to do for future funding cycles. Now, just a little bit of background. We have, like I said, we have transferred cash in the past to the joint use program. We looked into all the different options we have, and we really feel that we don't have any more authority at this time to transfer. So I think we're pretty sure that the $561K we have is going to be the limit of what we have available for this year. So depending on what comes out of the report today, depending on if there's any assignments from the board, we're going to bring an August item back to address the applications that we do have available and see if we can fund at least partially one project, and we'll be doing that in August. So that's the status of the joint use program for this year. Does anybody have any questions about that or about the way the authority works or anything like that? Okay. I'm going to introduce Brian Odell. He's a supervisor in our office, and he's going to come up and talk about the project information worksheet item today.
Good morning. Tab 13 is the project information report. It's the purpose of the report is to show some of the unique information that's collected on the PIW, and also to introduce some graphics and charts that are going to be appearing in the SAB agenda every month. Starting with this month's agenda and each agenda thereafter, there's going to be some charts in the financial report section. So this month it's tab 6. It currently represents information gathered on 567 new construction projects from 2008 through 2011. We know there were no apportionments in 2009, but it's everything going back that far that we have, which is 84% of the new construction projects apportioned. Just quick background on the PIW. We know it's collected 3 times. It's submitted with the fund release authorization. Data is collected there, and again at the first 5006, which is a year later, and then on the final 5006. And it collects information such as bid dates, local requirements that the school districts have that are not funded by the state, the reuse architectural plans, and also things such as local contribution that went into the project that's not part of the district match, so things they paid above and beyond the state and local match. Last month, as part of the EO's report, there was a graphic there, and we'll see sort of an update of those. They'll be broken down. That's in tab 6. That showed the different types of the component types of facilities that went into these projects. There was a question about what other represented, and it represents things such as staff rooms, conference rooms, resource specialist rooms, things like that. We had a big column of just other. Going forward, we hope to post these to the OPSC website and the Governor's Strategic Growth and Bond Accountability website. And someday we hope to be able to have an interactive report system where anyone's able to go to our website and create reports. They can put in some criteria, filter it through on different parts of the state, different types of projects, so that anyone will be able to do that. If we look on page 109, there is a big chart of California, or a map of California, and there it shows the pupils housed and the square feet constructed based on the project data organized by DSA regions. Let's see. And then on page 110, there's 3 different graphics there. The first one, the box, is the statewide square footage of what was constructed. Then map of California, again broken out by DSA regions, but it shows the permanent, the percentage of projects that were in those regions that were of permanent construction completely. And then there's another box that shows the classroom construction type, and that's broken down. It's not total, the entire project was permanent, modular, or portable, as that pie chart shows, but it's rather the classrooms and how that breaks out. And then page 111 just shows a map of California with the DSA regions with all of the counties named in them, just for our reference. And then if we turn to tab 6, towards the back there on page 72, we have some more charts there, new schools versus additions. This was interesting. I thought it was interesting anyways, that if we look at the new school projects, it represented 34.6% of all of the projects. But then if we look at the other pie chart, it shows the state apportionments. And the new school represented 81% of the funding, and that excludes site acquisition. So we see a smaller number of projects, but they're obviously much larger, so they take up a lot more funds to provide. All right, and then the next chart on page 73 again shows the state of California broken down by the DSA regions, and it shows the total dollars that went into the construction projects in each region, and that's state and local match. So it's actually everything, state, local match, and then any funds contributed by the district beyond that. Page 74 shows, this has to do with reused architectural plans and the number of times that the plans are reused by that district. It was 87 projects, or 15%. And they were used an average number of 3 times by that district. And then 74A, B, and C, again, are the same graphics that appeared in last month's, but now it's broken out by bond. So the first one, 74A, is Prop 1D, new construction projects built, and shows the number of classrooms, multi-purpose rooms, all of those different types of breakdowns. And then we have one for 47 and 55 as well. Any questions? Mr. Smoot?
Yes. The PIW stated purposes are AB 127 adjustments, bond accountability, and bid climate. This report doesn't seem to answer any one of those questions or address any of those issues. And it seems to me like, yes, it's interesting information, but it doesn't bear a relevance to the reason for having a PIW. The PIW, as far as we're concerned, has turned out to be a dismal failure in accomplishing any one of those 3 objectives, and we're wondering why you're even trying to continue with the form.
For those watching, Mr. Smith's question was that the PIW was less than successful. I think he said dismal failure. And that there were 3 purposes of the PIW, which was grant adequacy, also bond accountability, and also bid climate. And he's saying that these charts may look nice, but don't really seem to address in any of those things. And as far as the bond accountability, the charts that we have now, and hopefully we'll continue to get in the future, do show the public and the taxpayers where the dollars were spent all throughout the state, and that it's not just money going out, but it's actually schools being constructed, students being housed. We mentioned pupils housed, so these are actually students that are affected by these bonds and all of those things. As far as bid dates, the bid climate, that's something that we'd like to refine further to be able to provide more useful information on. We have the ability to do that, which is very unique, because as we know, usually we track things based on apportionment year, and not necessarily bid date, so it's not going to reflect the bid climate that school districts are having to pay as they go out and try to cover all of the costs for these. So that's something to look forward to. Mr. Smoot.
Just to keep harping on the issue, which is something I like to do, all of the information that you have there as far as bond accountability is information that's already in your file, the application. So the problem is that the PIW is a tremendous amount of work for school districts, and they don't mind doing it. However, if there's no real purpose, no real value, no outcome that benefits either the state or the school district, it doesn't make sense to have redundant submissions of information that just cause a lot of trouble, time, and effort to prepare.
Mm-hmm. His statement was, well, you know, most of this or all of this information can be gathered from other sources, and it's extra work for the school districts. If school districts don't feel like they're getting any value from it, why should they keep filling it out? There are some specific things in here that can only be gathered from the PIW. We don't know of any other place that it exists. Specifically, what was one of the charts? I'll never find it because I'm on the spot, but it had to do with, I don't know if the bid dates are captured anywhere else, and I know that it's not captured any funding beyond the state and local match. So we have the 50-50 for new construction, and then it also asks for funds beyond that. There's also something, there's a place to put in any requirements that the school district had to pay that the state just wasn't, it was an ineligible expense completely. Different local traffic requirements and things like that. So there are some things that are pretty unique to the PIW. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Now we'd like to introduce Mr. Fred Yeager, Department of Education. Wonderful.
Good morning. Quick update since there's not much really new since 2 weeks ago. So just a couple items. 2 weeks ago I mentioned we were meeting with a pipeline technical advisory group on June 30th, and that was to look at some of the technical issues in our 2007 pipeline protocol, which is used by most districts to evaluate pipelines within 1,500 feet of a school site as required by Title V. So we met with 7 or 8 analysts that use that and have we're still compiling all the information on that, and some I should advance it or did it right. Some of the specific questions we asked them, is this an appropriate tool for evaluating existing sites? The regulation speaks to using it for new sites. And are there ways to present the information that comes out of this very technical report, better ways to present it to decision makers? So we're going to be working with a policy group of board members, planners, non-technical people to look at some of those things as how is this information presented so that the local boards can make the informed decisions. So that will be coming up over the summer. And the last piece, I just wanted to go over a Title V piece somewhere in there. On placement of buildings, you can see the language there that says, building placement shall consider compatibility of the various functions on campus, so band, science, site layout of buildings and physical education areas shall be adequate to meet the instructional, security, and service needs of the program. And a specific point being that building placement has favorable orientation to wind, sun, rain, and natural light. Now, this is something that is really upon the district to take into effect when they're doing their design. What I put together here, well, I didn't draw this, but what we have here is a couple of examples of some of the competing priorities in a site layout. This site layout, based on an actual project in an urban district, that's not LA, was orientated for solar panels. So you can see that it's off-center, creating some unusable areas down in here. Similarly, a district may take advantage of that for natural ventilation. Okay. And as you recall in that regulation, it says that the site layout needs to be compatible for the physical education program, and I talked about that 2 weeks ago. What this diagram shows is some building reorientation, realignment that increases the physical education area. And here's it says 93% increase in physical education area by the realignment of the buildings. Now, in this case, the competing design principle for the district of natural ventilation or daylighting may be reduced, but the physical education area is increased. And here's another scheme where there is a 136% increase in the physical education areas by the realignment and repositioning of the buildings. See, these are flipped 180 degrees. So this really just shows that as the design goes about, there are competing interests. Not saying that whether the orientation for solar or wind is more important than the providing of the physical education. Just something, as you look at it, that it's just one of the many competing interests in a design. Now, the provision of physical education does still need to be provided, so that's a balancing act that has to take place during the site planning. So, other than that, that's about it. And I think Brian will wrap it up. If there's any questions.
That's the extent of our presentation today. Is there any questions before we conclude? DSA will be back next month. Well, I want to know where DSA was. They'll be here next month. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for attending. We appreciate it. We'll see you at the SAB this afternoon. Thank you.